Red Bull just made it official. Christian Horner returns. After a terrible weekend in Belgium, the team drops a bombshell that stuns Formula One. Want to know if he'll be in charge in Hungary? Curious about his salary? Then don't go anywhere. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. In the immediate aftermath of a catastrophic outing at Spa-Francorchamps, where both Max Verstappen and Yuki Tsunoda delivered performances so deeply flawed they ignited internal alarm bells across the Red Bull organization, the illusion of dominance shattered. Gone was the clinical precision that once defined the team. What remained was a battered structure, exposed under pressure and stripped of the psychological edge that had intimidated competitors for years. The garage was subdued, the post-race energy sterile. Verstappen's radio messages carried frustration layered beneath controlled restraint, while Tsunoda descended into erratic outbursts that left engineers scrambling and team officials privately concerned. What unfolded in the hours that followed wasn't damage control, it was emergency reconstruction. Red Bull, for all its might, had entered a tailspin. The confidence that once pulsed through their operations was replaced by indecision, confusion, and internal blame. Behind the polished facade, senior management initiated a wave of back-channel conversations. Helmut Marko, never one to telegraph his moves, took personal initiative. Quietly, without informing certain corporate arms of the team, he reached out directly to the one figure whose shadow still loomed over the chaos, Christian Horner. The former team principal, publicly distanced amid boardroom turbulence and behind-the-scenes infighting, was no longer viewed as expendable. He had become essential. The conversation between Marko and Horner was described by insiders as stark and unsentimental. No posturing. No grand apology. Just the unvarnished truth. The organization had lost control. The current leadership vacuum had bred operational disarray. Driver trust was fractured. Decision-making had slowed to a crawl. Technical departments were misaligned. Race weekend execution was slipping. In Marko's own words, relayed by one source, "We are losing the team." Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Horner, known for his strategic mind and unflinching grip on internal dynamics, didn't need persuasion. His acceptance was immediate, but not indulgent. He didn't request revisions to prior contracts, didn't ask for restitution or image rehabilitation. There were no ultimatums. No revised clauses. He didn't need leverage, he had clarity. He was returning to rescue a ship that had drifted far from the course he once enforced with ruthless efficiency. Terms were already prepared. His salary, once a reflection of his seniority and brand value, was reduced to a fraction of what he had previously earned. The benefits were stripped down. The comforts gone. The position was no longer about perks, it was about authority. Horner agreed without negotiation. The return wasn't ceremonial, it was functional. Red Bull was no longer a stable empire. It was a wounded beast, and he had come to stabilize it before it collapsed completely. Internally, the shift was instant. Meetings were rescheduled. Reporting lines rerouted. Leadership teams were placed under immediate performance review. Access to engineering files, telemetry systems, and race strategy archives was restored to Horner within hours. His presence at the factory wasn't met with celebration. It was met with a sense of gravity. No one smiled. No one relaxed. They knew exactly why he had returned. Verstappen, whose patience had been quietly eroding, met with Horner in private. The driver's entourage, previously drifting from core team structures, re-engaged with renewed focus. While details of the meeting were locked behind closed doors, the energy around Verstappen shifted. Engineers reported renewed cooperation. His tone in subsequent strategy briefings was sharper, more precise. He no longer looked like a man tolerating dysfunction. He looked like a soldier taking orders again. Tsunoda's situation grew precarious. Already under scrutiny for his inconsistency and inability to translate potential into points, he found himself under increased internal analysis. Horner's standards are not forgiving, and Tsunoda's profile no longer aligned with the ruthlessly results-driven ecosystem being reinstated. Discussions surrounding test sessions for reserve drivers intensified. Metrics from prior races were revisited. Comparisons once avoided were now being studied. Tsunoda wasn't told his time was up, but no one offered him assurances either. Within the technical departments, accountability returned in full force. The chassis division was instructed to revalidate its correlation models after discrepancies emerged in Spa. Strategy units were told to strip away predictive overlays and return to fundamentals, real-time data, driver input, and raw performance windows. Communications protocols during sessions were modified to eliminate dual-channel feedback, reducing delays and confusion during dynamic track conditions. Every component of the team was being evaluated not for what it could do, but for how much it had failed to do in recent months. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Publicly, Red Bull made no declaration. There were no glossy press releases or branding campaigns to celebrate Horner's reinstatement. His return wasn't dressed up for media. It was executed in silence. That silence was intentional. The team didn't want applause. They wanted results. Rivals noticed. Mercedes, long at odds with Horner's tactics, acknowledged internally that his presence altered the landscape. McLaren recalibrated their expectations. Ferrari, perpetually in flux, quietly hoped Red Bull's internal pressure would remain combustible. But the paddock understood something had shifted. Not because a statement was made, but because Horner had reappeared, and the air around the team was no longer aimless. It was sharp, heavy, cold. He returned not to negotiate peace, but to reimpose control. His leadership doesn't rely on inspiration. It relies on elimination of error. Departments that don't deliver will be dismantled. Staff that obstruct cohesion will be removed. Loyalty will be measured in output, not sentiment. What Horner brings isn't comfort, it's structure. Red Bull doesn't need a hero. It needs an executioner. There is no timeline for recovery. No promise of instant transformation. But what's clear to every rival watching is that the disarray that engulfed the team at Spa triggered something far more dangerous than a temporary slump. It reawakened the man who built their winning machine from the inside out. And now that he's back, no one is safe. Not from failure, not from scrutiny, and certainly not from the consequences of complacency. When do I begin? The words left his mouth with no pause, no emotion, no space for interpretation. There were no follow-up questions, no pause to review the fine print, no need to contemplate risk. It wasn't eagerness, it was inevitability. He wasn't joining a project. He was taking command of a crisis. And everyone in the room knew it. Because what Christian Horner walked into wasn't a job, it was a battlefield. And he came armed. The conditions placed before him were ruthless. There would be no protection, no leniency, no margin for personal chaos. The company's mandate was unshakable. The Red Bull emblem comes before personality, before narratives, before anything that breathes even the faintest scent of scandal. The empire didn't care for headlines unless they centered around speed, control, and supremacy. They weren't hiring a personality, they were reinstating a guardian of order. And the first thing they made clear? One misstep, one headline, one off-camera controversy, and the exit door would swing open, permanently. No mediation. No severance. No damage control. The legacy didn't matter. Only precision did. He nodded once. Agreement wasn't verbal, it was in the silence that followed. He didn't walk back into Milton Keynes like a returning hero. He entered like a warden reclaiming control of a facility gone rogue. No cameras. No team briefings. No motivational speeches. Within an hour of arriving, he had locked himself inside the operations center, requesting direct access to raw race day metrics and pit stop analytics. He didn't want summaries. He didn't trust filtered interpretations. He demanded direct feeds. Real-time delay logs. Trigger point errors. Frame-exact breakdowns of handoff times, tool transitions, release calls. He watched it all start to finish, for 8 full race weekends. And what he saw disgusted him. The errors weren't just mechanical, they were cultural. Complacency had crept in. Pit crews hesitated. Engineers second-guessed. Strategies buckled under pressure. Horner responded the only way he knew how, without emotion. Without mercy. Contracts were voided. Dozens of personnel were removed. No farewell. No reassignment. They were labeled as liabilities and cut without ceremony. Lateness by tenths had become lateness by seconds. That wasn't a weakness. It was infection. And he removed it. The replacements weren't recruited. They were extracted. Elite units from Red Bull's underground performance labs, sharp-edged specialists from satellite programs, technicians accustomed to working in blackout conditions with zero tolerance for failure. These weren't workers, they were instruments. Not one of them smiled when they arrived. Not one asked questions. They didn't need to. Their roles were already calibrated. Once the crew was purged, Horner dismantled the communications grid. Every headset line, every internal channel, every signal path was reviewed, optimized, rewritten. Feedback loops were restructured. Radio clutter was deleted. Redundancies were converted into alerts. From now on, every exchange between car and wall would be faster than thought. Confusion wasn't a possibility, it was an offense. Systems were stress-tested under race simulation loads, with random variable insertion, triple-speed execution, and interruption scenarios. Anyone who failed to keep up was removed, no questions asked. Nothing escaped the audit. Strategy room protocols were burned to the ground. The pit wall no longer worked in layers. The decision tree was flattened. Data filtration was removed. From now on, information wouldn't flow upward, it would flow inward to one chair. And that chair was his. Forecasts were retested using satellite-linked microclimate models. Tire degradation estimates were rebuilt using fresh heat mapping simulations. Race simulations ran through the night on triple-speed algorithms, looping dozens of scenarios simultaneously, forcing engineers to rethink not just what could happen, but how fast it could collapse if they hesitated again. He targeted the software division next. He demanded they rewrite the launch algorithms. Acceleration mapping was restructured to account for subtle changes in ambient humidity and track evolution. Clutch release thresholds were narrowed. He didn't want flexibility. He wanted consistency under pressure so exact that even the slightest anomaly would trigger a tactical override. The goal wasn't adaptability. It was total control. Departments that once operated with autonomy were stripped of privilege. Cross-collaboration was replaced with verification chains. Everyone answered to someone, who answered to someone else, who answered to Horner. Authority no longer came from experience, it came from measurable output. Charts replaced resumes. Simulations replaced seniority. Memory no longer protected anyone. Elsewhere in the factory, the silence grew heavier. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when he passed. Jokes dried up. Screens turned away. Some tried to make themselves invisible. Others worked twice as long, hoping the data would speak louder than their nerves. No one asked about the future. No one dared speak of comfort. They knew what this was. Not a new chapter, a purge. Even long-standing staff, those who once shared celebratory champagne on title nights, weren't immune. If their performance curve had dipped, they were sidelined. If their reaction times had slowed, they were reassigned. He wasn't building morale, he was eliminating drag. And drag in his eyes wasn't just aerodynamic. It was human. It was organizational. And it had to be erased. Other teams began whispering. They saw the shifts. They heard the names being pulled from Red Bull's deepest layers. Names associated with prototypes, Black Ops testing units, simulation engineers from fighter jet programs. It wasn't restructuring. It was rearmament. Horner wasn't back to run a team. He was back to wage a campaign. And every department inside that building had two choices, align or disappear. There were no smiles. No celebrations. No public relations blitz. Just pressure. Just silence. Just the echo of footsteps down metal corridors. Because the signal had been sent loud and clear, Red Bull wasn't fixing problems. It was erasing excuses. And Horner, sharper than ever, colder than before, had returned to finish what everyone else was too afraid to start. And what came next wouldn't be a recovery. It would be a reckoning. He didn't re-enter the scene quietly. He didn't come back to observe. He stormed into the heart of Red Bull racing like a man unwilling to tolerate another second of hesitation. Christian Horner didn't smile, didn't pause, didn't acknowledge the pleasantries. His return wasn't about resuming control, it was about seizing it with brutal clarity. From the first hour, every room he walked into shifted. The temperature dropped. The air grew denser. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People straightened up instinctively, sensing that what was once acceptable would no longer be enough. Every system was scrutinized. Every role dissected. The structure he'd once built with patience was now being torn down with urgency. He demanded instant transparency. There were no soft landings, no recovery periods, no buffer for those who had coasted in his absence. Individuals previously protected by internal politics were exposed. Processes that had been allowed to drift became the center of immediate intervention. Leadership positions once thought secure were no longer guaranteed. He made it clear, past success had no currency in the new order. Logistics were the first battlefield. He ordered a complete audit of operational workflows, from flight planning to equipment handling to crew rotations. Manual processes were replaced overnight with real-time adaptive systems. Machine-led diagnostics now controlled garage temperatures to optimize tire prep environments by the second. Nutrition tracking for pit staff was introduced with biometric feedback loops, designed to maintain peak focus under stress. Physiological sensors are now worn by team personnel to measure reaction time degradation, hydration status, and neurological fatigue across race weekends. Precision had replaced routine. Data had replaced instinct. Error was no longer tolerated, it was eliminated. Each department received direct instructions. Not recommendations. Not suggestions. Mandates. Daily performance metrics must be submitted, reviewed, and acted upon within 24 hours. Technical heads were given conditional mandates: improve output or expect structural consequences. There was no room for laggards. No patience for the sentimental. Horner didn't want harmony. He wanted efficiency under pressure. He wanted discomfort, because discomfort forces growth. He summoned a closed-door meeting with core personnel, stripped of PR and stripped of ego. Comfort breeds stagnation, he said, with no flair, no soft tone. From this moment forward, nobody is safe. Accountability is the new currency. We either evolve faster than everyone else, or we become irrelevant. That night, while the team scrambled to reorganize, he boarded a private aircraft without fanfare. His destination was known only to a handful. His purpose wasn't ambiguous. He met with Max Verstappen and Jos in a secured location far from the noise. The conversation was sharp, unsentimental, and surgical. It wasn't about reassurance. It was about conviction. Horner outlined the overhaul in brutal terms. No excuses, no distractions, no tolerance for decline. Verstappen listened, jaw set, his eyes locked not on the plan, but on the conviction behind it. And when Horner finished, Max's response was swift: win, or everything we've built means nothing. It wasn't emotional. It was transactional. Like everything in Formula One ultimately is. Once back in the UK, Horner escalated the transformation. A high-security command center was commissioned inside Red Bull headquarters, outfitted with predictive analytics, behavioral heat maps, live-streamed engineering simulations, and algorithmic decision triggers. It's a central nervous system designed for speed, with no tolerance for human hesitation. A constant feed of driver telemetry, pit crew biometrics, simulator data, and track condition forecasts now pulses through it every hour. Nothing is left to chance. The line between race preparation and military-grade precision has been erased. Technical staff now work in rotations dictated not by HR guidelines, but by stress index scores and neural performance algorithms. Key engineers have been placed under silent performance evaluations, tracked without being notified. Internal communications are monitored for response lag and cognitive load. If someone isn't fast enough, sharp enough, or focused enough, they're quietly removed. No warnings. Just absence. Rival teams have gone into surveillance mode. McLaren insiders are tracking the changes with growing concern. Mercedes has reportedly launched a quiet internal task force to study Red Bull's revised operating model. Ferrari is rumored to be evaluating industrial espionage tools, not to copy the RB20, but to understand how the structure supporting it has become so dangerously efficient. Inside Red Bull, fear is no longer whispered, it's operationalized. Junior staff feel the pressure. Mid-tier managers report higher turnover risk. The pace is unsustainable for the weak. But for those who endure, the reward is proximity to something terrifyingly dominant. Horner isn't rebuilding a team. He's forging a weapon. There are no interviews. No media tours. No soothing public statements. Only silence and motion. He's not here for applause. He's here to eliminate doubt. Every delay is a threat. Every second lost is treated like sabotage. Every competitor is now an obstacle that will be dismantled without mercy. No one questions the intent anymore. No one misunderstands the stakes. This isn't preparation. This isn't response. This is warfare. Horner's vision doesn't include second chances. It doesn't tolerate mistakes. And it certainly doesn't wait for consensus. He isn't returning to form, he's redefining what form is. And the rest of the grid? They can feel it. In the way their own staff glance at Red Bull's pit box. In the silence that follows whenever someone whispers his name in the paddock. In the quiet terror that spreads when a dominant team becomes ruthless, disciplined, and unyielding all at once. Because now, Red Bull isn't just a team. It's a machine. And Christian Horner is the relentless force behind it. He's not reorganizing, he's dismantling and rebuilding from scratch, launching a ruthless campaign to purge inefficiency, eliminate ambiguity, and reassert total command over every layer of Red Bull's racing machine. What began as a handful of strategy sessions has escalated into a full-blown restructuring offensive with one aim: to make sure no mistake, no miscommunication, no lapse in execution ever slips through the cracks again. The tone behind closed doors has shifted. This is no longer about optimization. This is about eradication of weakness, with the intensity of a man who sees enemies forming on every front. 3 covert tactical assemblies have already occurred, each more intense and controlled than the last. They weren't collaborative workshops, they were interrogations masked as briefings. Every department was forced to justify its role in the recent string of failures, no matter how small. The simulations team had to account for mismatched data models that created flawed projections in Hungary. The pit wall staff were confronted with time-stamped comms logs showing hesitation during crucial tire calls. Driver feedback analysts were ordered to explain why their interpretations diverged from actual track behavior. There was no patience for excuses. No margin for error. Every misstep was traced back, and every contributor was made to feel the full weight of accountability. To counteract the creeping paralysis that has infected the decision-making process, a new enforcer has been embedded inside the operational nerve center. Not a figurehead or middleman, an authorized strike leader who sits between Milton Keynes and the circuit command unit, empowered to override delays, neutralize internal friction, and crush indecision before it metastasizes. There is no room for collaborative back and forth when milliseconds are at stake. This isn't a liaison, it's an executioner of ambiguity. The priority is speed, control, absolute precision. The media side has not escaped the purge. What once passed for harmless driver emotion or organic team banter is now viewed as uncontrolled fire damaging the brand's credibility. A specialized media filtration system is being established behind the scenes. A black box that scrubs, shapes, and weaponizes every word before it reaches the public. Verstappen's unfiltered transmissions, once considered charmingly blunt, are now flagged for containment. Tsunoda's public outbursts are officially classified as liabilities. The messaging will now follow a singular directive: suppress chaos, amplify order. Public relations are no longer about transparency. They are about influence management. A team of behavioral analysts has reportedly joined the media unit, tasked with mapping out emotional volatility triggers in both drivers and fans. Every social post, every on-camera expression, every mic'd-up moment is being logged, categorized, and fed into a sentiment algorithm designed to identify risk points before they go viral. The team isn't just trying to survive the media cycle, they intend to bend it. Beneath all this, Horner is maneuvering quietly to extract strategic assets from rival operations. One name keeps surfacing in encrypted internal chats: a recently departed Mercedes tactician, someone with an insider's understanding of Brackley's Longview Racecraft. This isn't a move born out of curiosity, it's a tactical acquisition. A weaponization of insider knowledge to outthink, outtime, and outmaneuver every move McLaren, Ferrari, or Mercedes might attempt in the second half of the season. The negotiations are being handled off-site, without legal teams, and with full deniability. Should the deal close, it will be seen not as a hire, but as a declaration. And still, one figure remains unresolved. Tsunoda, once tolerated as volatile but promising, is now being dissected like a broken circuit board. Internal evaluations have intensified. His raw pace is no longer enough to excuse his emotional lapses. His conduct is no longer interpreted as passion, it's seen as obstruction. Every time he snaps on the radio, every time he second-guesses team calls mid-race, it injects instability into a system that can no longer afford friction. Private reports suggest his comms are now monitored not just for clarity, but for tone, voice stress patterns, interrupt frequency, deviation from tactical commands. Analysts are quantifying how often his feedback diverges from actual car performance. The data isn't flattering. Internal performance assessments have added a new column, psychological reliability. His name ranks dangerously low. Replacements are being modeled in simulation environments. Several drivers from the talent pool have already been secretly tested. Their profiles suggest lower risk, higher compliance, and greater consistency under pressure. The decision, when it comes, won't be personal. It will be clinical, efficient, unemotional. That's the environment Horner is building, one where personal loyalty no longer trumps systemic stability. The restructuring isn't visible to the outside world yet, but its effects are beginning to ripple. Conversations inside other teams have grown cautious. Rival strategists are starting to suspect that Red Bull is preparing something radical. Not just an internal tightening of screws, but a transformation of the entire decision-making ecosystem. This is no longer about staying ahead on the stopwatch. This is about making sure no other team can even see the path Red Bull is taking. Christian Horner is no longer operating with tolerance, patience, or sentimentality. Every move he's making now comes from a place of brutal necessity. The time for hope, for waiting, for emotional attachment to potential is over. What Red Bull is building for the next phase of its existence, especially with its engine division about to take full control, is far too critical to be disrupted by weak links. And one name keeps surfacing in every internal meeting, performance review, and technical debrief: Yuki Tsunoda. Behind the smiles and staged media appearances, frustration is building at a relentless pace. Tsunoda's inability to deliver consistent results has become an unignorable liability, one that is now threatening to compromise not just the second car's performance, but the entire competitive strategy of the organization. In a championship fight where every millisecond matters, Red Bull cannot afford to keep someone in the seat who fluctuates wildly from race to race, showing moments of talent followed immediately by confusion and regression. Horner, having reasserted his authority following months of off-track turbulence, is wielding power with precision and cruelty. He's not just cleaning house, he's restructuring the DNA of the entire team. The message is clear: fall in line or get cut out. Tsunoda is no longer being evaluated as a development prospect. He's being judged as a threat to Red Bull's long-term vision. Every error, every qualifying failure, every strategic misread is another nail in the coffin of his tenure. There is real movement happening behind the scenes. Alternative drivers are being evaluated with far more seriousness than Tsunoda's camp wants to admit. Liam Lawson, who was once a backup plan, is now being positioned as a fully viable replacement. His sim sessions have been extensive. His feedback has impressed engineers accustomed to working only with elite-level talent. More alarmingly for Tsunoda, these trials are no longer theoretical. The organization is preparing itself for a transition that could happen abruptly. Monza has been marked internally as a point of no return. If Tsunoda fails to demonstrate a dramatic shift in form, there are already discussions in motion about sidelining him for the Asian races. It would be a devastating blow, not only from a sporting perspective, but from a commercial one. The brand teams are in turmoil, drafting emergency contingency plans for promotional material. Sponsors tied specifically to Tsunoda's image have begun asking questions. But none of this has swayed Horner's direction. He's done sacrificing performance for marketability. Even Max Verstappen, rarely interested in team politics, has taken a quiet but deliberate stance. He has reportedly expressed dissatisfaction with the imbalance in driver feedback and development direction. Max knows what's at stake. The technical alignment between both cars is critical. When one side of the garage is constantly playing catch-up, the entire operation suffers. He's demanding a teammate who can contribute meaningfully, not just fill a seat. Internally, Red Bull's technical team is undergoing a cultural shift. There's no tolerance for inconsistency, no room for emotional attachments. The high-performance unit driving Red Bull powertrains forward has adopted a zero-error mindset. Everything is being optimized: aerodynamics, power delivery, race strategies, driver inputs. Tsunoda's data, when laid next to benchmarks, doesn't just fall short, it exposes weaknesses. Braking instability. Poor tire preservation. Lack of adaptability in changing track conditions. These aren't small issues. They are fundamental flaws that cannot be ignored. The whispers have escalated into direct conversations. Senior figures have begun floating names not just within the Red Bull Junior program, but outside it. There's a cold urgency in the air. Horner is no longer reacting, he's initiating. If replacing Tsunoda causes controversy, so be it. If it rattles the marketing department, that's a price he's already accounted for. All that matters now is building a team that can withstand the chaos of 2026 and emerge dominant. This is not about disappointment anymore, it's about elimination. Red Bull has no room for uncertainty, no interest in mediocrity, and no patience for unfulfilled potential. Tsunoda is standing on a collapsing ledge, and the people who once pulled him back are no longer reaching for him. There is no rescue plan. Only replacements. He's the embodiment of unfinished business, the relentless spirit that refuses to fade, the competitor who doesn't just return. He resurfaces like a storm reborn, fiercer, colder, more merciless. His past is carved in steel and carbon fiber, but he's not living in it, he's dragging it behind him like a weapon. While others speak of legacy, he's rewriting his in real time, with every turn of the wheel and every breath of defiance. The world may have changed around him, but the flame in his core still burns with violent precision, unshaken by time or doubt. They try to pretend he's past it, that the sport has moved on, that the new era belongs to someone else. But deep down, they know the truth. He's still the most dangerous man on the track. Not because of raw speed, but because of something no simulator can measure. Intent sharpened by scars, wisdom etched into muscle memory, instincts refined through agony and triumph. He sees the game differently now. While others are chasing glory, he's hunting control. Control over the chaos, the noise, the weakness hiding in plain sight. In the garage, every detail matters. The flicker in the telemetry, the hesitation in the throttle mapping, the look in an engineer's eyes, they all speak a language only he understands. He doesn't ask for trust, he demands alignment. The team can feel it. This isn't a campaign, it's a mission. He's not here to perform, he's here to extract every ounce of potential, squeeze it until it breaks, then rebuild it stronger than before. Every second wasted is a betrayal. Every excuse is gasoline on the fire. He studies rivals like a predator studies patterns. Quiet, calculating, waiting for that tiny lapse in concentration that turns contenders into prey. His mind never stops. It's mapping strategies mid-corner, dissecting tire degradation during cool-down laps, rehearsing overtakes in the silence of the night. He's not interested in highlight reels. He's obsessed with dismantling expectations, crushing comfort zones, and weaponizing pressure until it's unbearable for anyone not built for this. The paddock senses it. That uneasy shift when he walks past. That tightening in the air when his car rolls out of the garage. He carries history on his shoulders, but he wears it like armor, not baggage. He doesn't need motivation from headlines or podiums. His fuel is darker, revenge, unfinished victories, the taste of silence after betrayal. He remembers the laughs, the rumors, the moments they wrote him off. He hasn't forgotten. He never will. There's no mercy in his eyes. No diplomacy in his voice. Just focus. A terrifying kind of focus that bends reality to his will. He doesn't need the fastest machine, he'll make it fast. He doesn't wait for the stars to align, he forces alignment. If the strategy falters, he'll override it. If the team hesitates, he'll carry the weight alone. Every lap is personal. Every mistake, his or theirs, becomes fuel for the next attack. He's already operating in a different dimension. While others worry about points and interviews, he's orchestrating chaos behind the scenes, destabilizing the status quo, creating just enough confusion to open a window, and when that window appears, he'll dive through it like a man possessed. He doesn't want the spotlight. He wants the silence that comes after domination. The moment when everyone stops talking because they've run out of ways to deny what they just witnessed. He's not interested in being remembered fondly. He wants to be remembered violently, as the one who returned not to celebrate, but to obliterate the idea that he was ever gone. The one who turned fading opportunity into an inferno of resurgence. He's not here for a graceful farewell. He's here for a hostile takeover. And there's not a damn thing anyone can do to stop it.